Welcome to EMBA905 International Business and Market Analysis, Task 3, a recorded oral presentation by Anthony Cooper. Over the first 2 weeks of January 2019, 19 students, 2 teachers visited 4 cities over 2 countries, with close to 30 meetings and 2 economic hunts. During that time, I recorded what the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of my experiences were, as well as some discoveries that I'd made. Let's start with the good. First stop, Hong Kong. The Hong Kong Polytechnic University provides research and development to support the business community in biomedical, aerospace, high-speed rail, and aviation. I was very impressed with the biomedical lab and facilities for student research. 3D printing and smart fabrics that could be created in this lab opens up a whole new opportunity for manufacturing, especially when combined with photo scanning. This experience exceeded my expectations. 3D printing using metal powder for specific components of the product's avalanche cell was a new takeaway for me, and how this may be incorporated into the avalanche manufacturing process down the line. Next stop, Vietnam, Da Nang. I was pleasantly surprised by the opportunity and lifestyle aspect of this city. So this is where things get quite interesting for avalanche, specifically how silk and material is produced and then converted to product. This is exactly what I was expecting to see and experience on the trip, not to mention obtain a contact for manufacturing in Vietnam.
It's very noisy.
This day really had to be the highlight of the trip. We went to Hoi An. I would say that in this particular part of Da Nang, tourism was at its finest, with foot massages. The dinner that we had that evening at the restaurant, the food was second to none and probably the best of the trip. And of course, the Vietnamese people, the culture, very warm people, very friendly. This was a big surprise experience for me, and definitely not what I was expecting before arriving.
Thank you. Take care.
So it's always nice to see a little bit of history in the places I visit. I took this photo in the Star Fort just below the Novotel where we were staying. I did not know what a Star Fort was prior to seeing it here in Da Nang. So I've left Vietnam with a little bit more knowledge than when I came. And I guess having this helicopter in the Star Fort is a bit of a reminder of Vietnam's war history, and how far the country has come from, and probably how focused they now seem to be on success and moving forward. So the American University in Vietnam, we were met by Dr. John, who has a PhD in risk management and was kind enough to take us through his experience in Vietnam. He's very much invested in the country and has a Vietnamese wife. I do wonder how his risk management experience felt about the fact that it took the university around 18 years to obtain a license to teach. As he explained, you can apply, but there is no guarantee at the end of the process that you'll get a license. I assume the sponsor of the university has very deep pockets to support such a venture with ongoing cost over such a long period of time. Da Nang seems like a great place to live and work, as there feels like a good balance of business and lifestyle. This is not what I thought Vietnam was like prior to arriving, and reminds me of a young Singapore. It has that potential. So back to Hong Kong, and we took a bus to Shenzhen in the morning and into China, and we met with Huawei. At this point, I started to understand the size and scale of what was happening in China. Everything I knew about China before this point was from what I read on papers or watched on programs like CNN. I was shocked at how open for business Huawei and China is, which is quite the opposite of what I thought before coming. The takeaway here for Avalanche is the significant reinvestment Huawei make back into their research and development and business, which is approximately 15%. And I would like to implement this into my business once profitability comes. I'm back to Hong Kong, and I believe we're at the 10th of January at this point. We meet with Town Gas, and I personally had never heard of Town Gas, but understanding where they've come from through their presentation and where and how they've reinvented themselves over years was probably one of the key moments of the trip, because meeting these guys after seeing Huawei and some of the other stuff that we had seen on the trip so far really was kind of a homecoming in terms of how successful companies become successful, but also how they stay successful. I took this photo when we went down to the lab in Town Gas because I was starting to pick up on a theme, and this was prior to Dr. Lowe's lecture back at the hotel later that afternoon. Bringing this back to my expectation statement prior to the trip, I was hoping that 905 was going to help me figure out how to grow the Avalanche business. This was a key turning point for me and the trip, which hopefully I can illustrate with the use of a mind map on my next slide that I created at the end of this particular day. I think you can't go to China without talking about Tencent. Taking things back to 901 and Crouching Dragon, there is no better example of market dominance than these guys, especially in a place that is just on scale absolutely mind-blowing, which is why they are so successful. I added this photo of the buildings in Shenzhen to highlight the enormity that we could see in the city. It's very impressive. On the next video, the scene shows the amount of people crossing through the Hong Kong and China border on the Hong Kong side, and hopefully demonstrates the amount of people that exist in China and subsequently the scale.
If you choose to go for the other port, it's even worse.
Are you serious?
Yeah. This is the latest. This is the most clean one.
It's insane. So can you explain to me?
Fresh Hippo brings me right back to my expectation statement and where the payments industry is headed. I was expecting to see different ways the Chinese were dealing with money, but I was not prepared for supermarkets that would not accept cash or credit cards. Okay, so that was the good part of the experience, the study tour. Now we're just going to have a look at the bad, and going back to Vietnam. So this is the only photo I have of FPT company. These guys could have potentially been quite interesting. As I noted from the presentation, they're currently doing some work in the blockchain area for Singapore Airlines. But unfortunately, the gentleman who did the presentation was very difficult to understand, and it was hard to get a feel for the company and what it was about and what was being presented. So back to China. This part of my presentation relates to the ugly. I knew about the pollution in China prior to going, but I had no idea just how bad it was. Air pollution was extreme, the colors were dull, green trees were not green, brown soil looked unhealthy, water looked contaminated. The earth felt sick. It makes me wonder about everything I'm doing for the environment individually. Will it be worth nothing without China's buy-in? I think so. All in all, a great trip. I'd like to thank everyone who appears on this slide, all the contacts of Dr. Lee, and Dr. Lee and Professor Drennan for enabling this experience for the students and myself. I got a lot out of it and learned a lot, and very pleased that I was able to do it. Thanks very much.